right, 9 minutes before 11 o'clock. I know Thanksgiving is a couple months away, but I always think of Thanksgiving when I think of topics like the topic in the Templars. Let me explain.
Okay.
Let me explain. When you go to Thanksgiving dinner, there's always somebody in your group that is a know-it-all, right? Mm-hmm. And you always want to say something to shed light on the fact that you know a little bit about what they seem to know a lot about, right?
Right, exactly.
If I go to Thanksgiving dinner and Dan Jones is there, I'm not saying a word because he knows way more than I'm ever going to know. Dan Jones wrote and presented the Netflix series Secrets of Great British Castles, the historical consultant to Nightfall, a new production from A&E Studios and the History Channel. He appeared in the official HBO explanation of the history behind the Game of Thrones. He is an amazing historian, and if I'm with him on Thanksgiving, I'm not saying a word. I'm going to be all ears because I will have nothing to offer. The book we're talking about that he wrote is called The Templars. It is right now, and I wonder if I'm letting him know this, because a lot of times when I tell this on the air, the author doesn't know. It's number one on Amazon in the Christian institutions and organizations category.
Nice.
It's not only number one. It's number one. It's number two as the Kindle edition, and it's number three as the audio version.
Nice.
Holy mackerel! That's pretty good. That's the first time I've ever seen that. Dan Jones, good morning, sir. What an honor.
Well, thank you for that great news as well, Larry. Look, if I'm with you at Thanksgiving around that table, you say what you want. I'll be polite.
Yeah. I think you have a lot more to offer than I do. I mean, I might ask you, would you like some tea with that or something? I don't know, but this is a fascinating part of history. You've kind of delved into something I know very little about. That's why I'm going to shut up and let you talk. So, who are the Templars?
Well, the Templars were an organization that began in the Crusades. So we talk about the Middle Ages, think knights, castles, King Arthur and all of that kind of business. Go back to the Crusades in the Middle East, just after the city of Jerusalem had fallen to Western Christian armies. There was a need for an organization that was going to protect pilgrims on the dangerous roads around the city. And that's where the Templars came in. They were trained knights who decided to form a brotherhood in which they'd swear religious vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They'd wear a uniform, white robes emblazoned with a red cross, and their initial purpose was to ride around the dangerous roads around Jerusalem to all the holy sites where Jesus had lived and had died, protecting pilgrims, particularly from Muslim brigands. But as things went on, they started to evolve very quickly. They got very popular. They received huge donations of money, of land, of property. They signed up a lot of men. They became what amounted to an elite military organization, like the Navy SEALs of the Middle Ages, if you can imagine such a thing. They were at the forefront of Crusader armies, fighting in sieges, fighting in the mountains, fighting in cities, fighting amphibious warfare. They also became very wealthy, and they were able to use their wealth and manage their wealth in a very sophisticated way. And as time went on, they developed what we'd now call an expertise in financial services. Think about them as instead of the Navy, like being the Navy SEALs, and also being Deloitte or J.P. Morgan at the same time, able to move money all around the world. They negotiated very favorable tax positions with lots of different governments, in which that they were able to maximize their wealth. They took on treasury function for governments. They lent money to governments. They propped up governments. They financed regime change. They were the all-seeing, all-pervading organization of their time.
When you study them and you hold up what you know about life and about humanity, do you ever question the whole celibacy thing? I always say, come on, they weren't.
Yeah.
How do they stick to that? They're not monks.
Well, this is the great paradox of the Templars, isn't it? They were and why they were so popular, but also why people questioned them so much, because on the one hand, they were knights, and the business of being a knight was a very worldly pursuit. You chased women and you killed men, effectively. And this was like a kind of rowing back of that and saying, hey, you know what? Let's take these knights and give them godly purpose, make them swear religious vows, and have them turn their energies to good ends. Now, the Rule of the Templars, which is a document I used, a very long medieval document that I used extensively in writing my book, is full of the most wonderful anecdotes. They are sworn to this vow of chastity, which says, you've got to abjure the company of women. You're not even allowed to kiss your aunt or your sister. I mean, I'm talking about a friendly peck on the cheek.
Right.
And then after that, somewhat later in the document, it's absolutely full of provisions against sexual relations between individual brothers, and it speaks in the most stern and outraged terms against the sin that would be committed if two brothers were to sleep together. And here's the thing about rules: you never make a rule if someone isn't breaking it, right? There's no rule in the Rule of the Templars that say Templars aren't allowed to fly magic unicorns around a sea of gold. Because that wasn't that wasn't happening.
Right,
No one thought it was going to happen.
Right.
You only make a rule if someone's breaking a rule. So I think it's obvious that there must have been human fallibility and human weakness within the organisation. But the goal, the aim was there, and it was somewhat noble.
And then you have Baldwin III you reference in your book, and how he married a 13-year-old.
Well, this is the Middle Ages for you. The sexual customs and certainly the marital customs amongst the aristocracy were somewhat different to today, so that marriage contracts could be made between children. You had adults marrying girls, who we now consider extremely young, on the cusp of puberty, before puberty sometimes. So this is how the world worked in the Middle Ages.
Dan Jones is our guest. The book is called The Templars. If you're looking at the streaming video, you see the cover of the book on there. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it is now number 1 in its category, and number 2 for the Kindle version, and number 3 as the Audible version. Oh my gosh, you've hit it out of the park. You've covered these types of topics in the past. Was there something about this one that attracted you specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. This is my 5th book about this kind of historical period. Now, I'd written a lot about England, about France, about great events like the Magna Carta or the Wars of the Roses, which George R. R. Martin drew a lot of inspiration from for Game of Thrones. But I knew that the Templars, there was this rich, fertile material here that I could tell a great story. Because number one, hey, I'm a storyteller.
Yeah,
I write history books I want a lot of people to read, because they're going to read like fiction, they're going to read like novels, but they're grounded in history. But I also thought this is a topic that's going to matter today, because it's a story that takes us to a war in the Middle East between different factions of Islam, in which there's a Western military intervention, and you have a long-running, expensive, unpopular war that, guess what, the West can't get out of. I knew that was going to feel like resonant.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Dan, thank you for being on the air with us today. Good luck with everything. And for the listeners, I have a copy of the book, but I don't have a whole lot of time to give it away. If you call me right now, I'll put your name on it, leave it on Patsy's desk. And Dan, do you have a website you can direct us to?
I've got a great little Facebook community going on, facebook.com/Dan Jones Historian.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. This is WOCA Ocala.
Fox News Radio, I'm Chris Foster. President Trump's responding to the national anthem protest in the NFL, growing since he came out against it.
The president